lecturers from last year. Um, Dr. Kopecky is started his career in medicine at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston. From there, he went on to do his internal medicine residency and cardiology fellowship at the Mayo Clinic, where he's currently a professor of medicine. He's a multiple-time recipient of the Mayo Cardiovascular Fellow Distinguished Teacher Award. So, and in 2013, he did receive the Jan Kellerman Memorial Award for work in the field of cardiovascular disease prevention. So, who better to talk to us than Dr. Kopecky? Thanks, Dr. Kopecky.
Thank you very much. It's nice and great, as always, to be here in beautiful Northern California. What we'll speak about for the next few minutes will be cardiovascular disease prevention, what you need to know for your patients, but really, it's what you need to know for yourself, too. I mean, face it, we're all aging, and it's a privilege to age, of course. Need this one? Okay. I want to mention, I'm very thankful for being asked back, but I want to mention the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. I think we all learned this in medical school and other things, that you forget about 90% of something you learn almost immediately. And if you don't review it, you need an immediate review, a month, a week. I think Dr. Khan has trouble remembering what I'm saying, so he asks me back every year. So we should put the Khan curve on here with a year review. Non-communicable diseases are interesting. You know, they're the ones that we don't get from infections. And really, for the first time in 2000 in the history of the world, more people died of non-communicable diseases than communicable diseases. As you may be aware, the number one reason is heart disease, cardiovascular disease. In 2015, interestingly, in the first time in the history of the world, more people in the world had a BMI over 30, which is obese, than a BMI under 18.5, which is too low. In 2016, March of last year, was the first time in America that Americans actually spent more money on food cooked outside the home than we did on food cooked inside the home. We're a grab-and-go society. Pick it up and take it on the way to the soccer game and take the kids or something. But cardiovascular disease, as bad as we may be in this country, it's the number one cause of death, but 80% of the deaths in the heart attacks over the next 3 or 4 decades will be in third world countries, not in first world countries, not in the United States, Europe, etc. So it's getting to be a rampant epidemic. So if you look at what makes us healthy, about 10% is access to health care. 20% may be our genes, about 20% is the environment, but at least half is our behavior, our healthy behaviors. So I was so glad to see they had healthy food for you to get today, the fruit and juices and such. Where do we spend our money? Well, 88% of our money in the United States we spend on medical services. And healthy behaviors, 4%. So we need to switch this around. We need to change this somehow. So the future is all about prevention, and prevention is about two things. The secondary prevention, people that have disease, is about adherence to treatment. You heard Dr. White talk about take the statins. It's very important. Primary prevention is all about behavior modification. And that's what we have to accomplish in this country, in this world, really, to prevent our disease epidemic. The problem is, first we make our habits, then our habits make us. You know, the first Nobel or poet laureate of England said this over a few hundred years ago, and that's very true. We eat, we do certain things over and over and over again, and even though they're bad for us. So what does our body want? What do you really need to live a long, healthy life? You know, there was a song almost 100 years ago, I'm going to dance with the one that brung me. Now, a lot of football coaches use this to say, you know, before the big game, they say, Coach, what are you going to do, run or pass? And say, well, we've been a running team, so we're going to dance with the one that brung us, you know, something like that. But you want to stay with what works. To be successful and survive optimally, our body needs what's helped us develop to this point. And it gets down to really 4 things. One is no pollutants. The second is a body size that doesn't overload our body parts. The third is a high-fiber, unprocessed foods that grow from the ground. And regular, vigorous physical activity. Now, I'm not just making these things up. These 4 things have been looked at. The lifestyle changes that reduce cardiovascular events. You can see that 76% of us don't smoke in the Western world. 40% of us have a body mass index under 25, so 60% of us are overweight. About 1 in 4 of us eat 5 fruits or vegetables a day, and the serving is a tennis ball. And then 1 in 5 of us get physical activity. So all 4 of these things, none of these are getting stents, none of these are taking pills, getting bypass. But only 3% of us do all 4 of these. So it doesn't really matter who you are, what your education, your income, or anything else. 97% of us aren't doing them. But if you do them all, over a couple of decades, it'll lower your heart attack rate by 87%. And even a prospective study showed that starting at today will lower your heart attack and death rate 40% in just 4 years, which is better than anything else that we've seen in medical care. And the other thing is you think, well, I'm doing almost all these, so I'm in pretty good shape. Well, how many of the first cardiovascular events that occur this year are going to be in high-risk patients? I saw on Dr. Khan's calendar, I think in September or something, you have the how to risk stratify patients. Now, high risk is over 7.5% chance over the next 10 years of having an event. So of all the heart attacks that occur this year, how many are going to be in high-risk patients? Will it be 100%, 95%? Well, it's less than 50% of those patients will actually be high-risk patients. We all known people like this. Had a treadmill last week, did great, woke up dead this morning. So no pollutants. Well, what are the pollutants that we should do, we should avoid? Well, smoking. A smoking ban has been done in many cities, and we've done it in Rochester. And remember, a smoker is 100 cigarettes in your lifetime, so it isn't much. And you say, yes, I smoke cigars, but I don't inhale. And I say, certainly, Mr. Clinton, but, one of those big stogies is about 20 cigarettes in terms of tobacco. Heart attacks go down within a month when you stop smoking. And we've done this in communities and seen. And the smokers, their heart attack rate goes down 14%. Former smokers goes down 19%. But you know who gets the most benefit? Never smokers. The ambient smoke is really bad for us. So 2/3 of the decrease in hospitalization after a smoking ban is in the people that don't even smoke, which is great. So another pollutant is stress. And I have patients that tell me, Doc, stress is my middle name. Doc, I get up in the morning for stress. I don't get stress, I give stress. I mean, we're all, we're fooling ourselves. Doc, it's everywhere. I can't get away from it. Well, job strain increases your risk of heart attack and death. So what is job strain? Well, on the x-axis, you can see how much control you have over your job, which we're getting less and less in medicine. And on the y-axis, you can see what are your job demands. So if the best is high control, low demands, although I think a doctor's and nurses is high control, high demand. That's where we really function, I think, optimally. But the worst, everyone agrees, which is job strain, is high demands, very low control. So if you look at job strain, what it does to your risk of heart attack, if you have no stress, in the green over here, you have or no job strain, that's a 1. But you have job strain, it increases your risk of heart attack and death by about 25%. And if the job strain starts to affect you so much that you drink heavily, it increases it further. And as you can see, all these things, if you're not physically active because of the job, you become obese, you start smoking. So job strain can lead to poor lifestyle changes that actually affect us more. So that's one of the other pollutants that I think we all have is stress, especially see it in women. Because every woman has 2 jobs. One is outside the home, the other is taking care of all the babies, including her husband at home. What can we do? We can practice positive thinking. And you say, oh, yeah, it's easy. Easy for you to say, but how do you do it? And actually, it's quite easy, and I'll show you. Almost 8,000 middle-aged men and women, no heart disease. They followed them up for 5 years to see if they had developed heart disease. And their goal was to ask them to write down 3 things that happened at the end of each day and why they happened, and be thankful for it. I don't write them down. I actually think them, because when I go to bed at night, I ruminate about all the things I didn't do today but I need to do tomorrow. One of our stress experts at Mayo does it in the morning. He'll say if he gets up and goes to the bathroom and starts brushing his teeth and he forgot, he'll go back and get in bed and think of 3 good things that happened. So positive psychological well-being is associated with a reduced risk of heart disease. So doing these things actually helps. Try to be positive. The second thing is a body size that doesn't overload our body parts. Well, it's not just America. I mean, it's all over the world now. We're getting a little overweight. And you look at animals in the animal kingdom. What does the animal kingdom tell us? You know, these zebras are all different. We know that. A zebra's skin is like a fingerprint. So everyone is different. But look at them. All the adults are about the same size. We don't have these fat zebras walking around unless they're in a zoo somewhere. So if you look at these two people, they have the same infrastructure, the same bone structure, the same kidneys, the same heart size. But guess what? One of them weighs twice as much as the other. So what happens when your heart beats? Well, it pumps blood around the body. What does fat do to that? 1 pound of fat is 5 miles of blood vessels extra. And your heart beats how many times a day? 100,000. So 1 pound of fat, extra 500,000 miles. 2 pounds, 1 million miles. You get the math. So obesity, which is obviously rampant in this country, is associated with increased rates of heart failure, both diastolic and systolic, HFpEF and diastolic dysfunction. Atrial fibrillation, it increases both the risk of having AFib and the risk of stroke. It may be the next thing that's added to the CHADS-2-VASc score. Coronary disease, sleep apnea, diabetes is more frequent, chronic renal insufficiency, and an interesting paper last month, showed that aortic stenosis was more common with obesity. And there were certain compounds, interleukins that go around the body and actually damage the aortic valve and lead to aortic stenosis. What's the other thing that happens with obesity? There's a 50% increase in erectile dysfunction if you can't see your junk. And how many men in America can't see their junk? About a third of them. I'm sorry. But lose weight. It's easy to lose weight, isn't it? We can always lose weight. 175,000 people here in this study, they had a 5% weight gain was achieved, and 80% of them regained it at 5 years. So what are the chances of losing weight? Well, if your body mass index is in the 30s or in the 40s, you can see here your probability of attaining normal weight. If you're a woman, 1 in 124, man, 1 in 200. If you get over a BMI over 40, you know, if you have they've done activity studies on people with BMIs over 40. Their activity, they are inactive in a 24-hour day. They're inactive for 23 hours and 54 minutes. I would think going to the refrigerator would be activity, but once you get over 40, a woman has a 1 in 600 chance, and a man's 1 in 1,000 of actually getting your weight back to normal. So we just don't do it, but I'll tell you some things we can do in a few minutes to help this. The only country I've seen that's really addressed this is Japan. This is a poster in one of the health clinics there that says, goodbye metabo, and metabo means overweight. And they passed a law in 2008 in their diet, which is the name of their Congress, that there was a mandatory waist measurement at your workplace. And I talked to some surgeons I know, and they say, yeah, they come to the hospital, they get a tape measure out, they measure our waist. And they fine your employer and your local government if your waist is too big. And the interesting thing is the waist for a man was 33.5 inches, for a woman 35.4 inches. It's the only culture I know where the woman has a bigger paunch in middle age than the man. And they've reduced obesity in the first few years by 10%, and by the end of 2015 they reduced it 25%. So think back 9 years ago. What's obesity done in this country? It's just shot up. In Japan's the only country that actually had it go down. I've asked many politicians in Rochester, Minnesota, and Minnesota, the state, to sponsor a bill like this. When they stop laughing, they say, "Are you kidding? I would be voted out of office so fast." The next thing is high fiber, unprocessed foods that grow from the ground. This sounds pretty easy. But a 2012 food and health survey, they actually asked about 1,000 people, said, what's harder to do? Is it harder to do your taxes or know how to eat healthy? And I actually asked this at a Mayo cardiology conference the other day, a bunch of cardiologists and nurses in the room, and they said 52% of them said it's easier to do my taxes, and that was exactly the answer in the general public. People say it's easier to do their taxes than it is to know how to eat healthy. Why are we so confused? Well, this article in the New York Times kind of points out on the x-axis here is when the foods America say is healthy, and the y-axis is the food nutritionists say is healthy. So you can see an example here is coconut oil. I have patients that come in, women especially, say, oh, doctor, I eat coconut oil every day. I eat a tablespoon. Around the internet, it helps wrinkles. Did you know, doctor, it helps wrinkles? It helps. So I try to point out to them that that's not correct. And they say, well, how is it not good? I say, well, if you look at your serum cholesterol and you replaced all your fat with one fat, as they did in this study, what happens to your LDL, which is the white bar here, as you can see? And the one that raises it the most is actually the coconut oil and palm oil. Raises it more than lard, more than butter, more than beef tallow, which is basically fat from a cow. So, we're really, there's a lot of things on the internet that get us confused. And the other thing that gets us confused is all these diets out there. And this is probably the most complex slide I'm going to show you, but the macronutrients in all these diets is very interesting. If you look on the left-hand side is the Ornish diet, which is very high carbs, very low fat. If you look at the right-hand side is the Atkins diet, which is very high fat, very low carbs. They're exactly opposite. Now, what three diets have been shown to reduce heart disease, heart attack? Ornish has shown that it has regression. The DASH diet, the dietary approaches to stop hypertension, that's been shown to reduce events. And the Mediterranean diet has been shown to reduce events. Guess which one's never been shown to reduce heart attacks? The American Heart Low-Fat Diet. That we continue. In fact, now, the Mediterranean diet, the last 5 Mediterranean diet studies have used the American Heart Low-Fat Diet as the control diet that they've eaten. And the key to these, I think, is not so much the fat and such like saturated fat, but this shows what type of fat. And you can see the Mediterranean diet, second from the right, is actually one of the highest fat diets. Atkins is the highest fat. But Mediterranean is monounsaturated fat, so olive oil, nuts, avocados, things like that. That oil is very good for you. So the Mediterranean diet encourages like 12 almonds a day. I have to tell men that's 12 almonds a day, not 12 handfuls of almonds a day. Because if one is good, 12 is obviously better. But every culture has an Atkins diet. I've been around the world and spoken on this, and I was in South Africa recently. It's the Noakes diet. And there's a guy there named Noakes that's writing about it. And basically it gets back to the Banting diet. Anybody ever heard of the Banting diet? Banting is this new diet, just came out. It was written because doctors aren't listening to their patients enough, and this helps you lose weight. And it's a low-carb diet. And it's basically what Atkins is and South Beach and all that. But you know what year that was written? 1863. And it's just a recurrence all over again. So low-carb diets, is there a mortality effect to a low-carb diet? If you look at all-cause mortality, yes, there is. A low-carb diet will increase your chance of dying by about 12%, significantly so. If you look at animal low-carb diets, so you go to the hamburger store, you get a hamburger, you throw away the bun, then that increases your risk by about 25%. But if you get a vegetable low-carb diet, vegetable-based, that actually lowers your mortality and your heart attack rate. So the Mediterranean diet is kind of where I think this is going, and it's going to help us. So low-carb diets, high animal fat, you can lose a little weight if you want to lose it for a wedding or a child's wedding or reunion or something like that, but it's not going to keep it off. So can foods be addictive? Does anybody think foods are addictive? Really? Jeez. They've actually looked at it at Yale and said, that pizza, chocolate, chips, cookies, ice cream, french fries, cheeseburgers, soda, that's a teenage diet. That's a teenage diet. That's a college diet. And they've actually tested this and said, if it's addictive, then you try to hide it from others. You try multiple times to quit, and you can't quit. You know it's bad for you, but you still do it, things like that. So they found some foods are not addictive, like cucumbers. But as you can see, you can take a corn and on the right-hand side, no butter, no salt, and you put butter and salt on it, it becomes addictive. So it's very interesting what happens here, but addictives is processed, high fat, high glycemic load. We get that buzz from it. And that's been shown over and over again. And I wonder if the food companies know this. Shocker. So 80% of the foods we eat in America is actually produced in America. So, buy American, right? And 7 of these foods are major subsidized food groups, and we all know what they are: corn and beans, wheat and rice, sorghum, dairy, and livestock. So that's subsidized by the government, their tax laws and other benefits. And so you can do a food subsidy score. This has been done. So 0 is you eat none of these foods is your calories. 1 is you eat almost all of your foods is one of these 7 calorie groups. And you can see that there's an association between the food, the subsidy score, and some of these problems we're having now. On the x-axis, it goes from 0 up to 1. So you can see obesity is tripled, dyslipidemia is doubled, abdominal obesity is 5 times higher, and then metabolic syndrome or diabetes, dysglycemia is tripled. So 56% of the calories that we consume in this country now are from one of these 7 food groups. Why is our government working against us? Why do they do this? I've tried to actually propose, to some congressmen that we work on this. Boy, if you talk to somebody from the Midwest, they say, son, my state makes high fructose corn syrup, and I am not going to take away the subsidies. Now, I grew up in Texas, and I had a friend who had a place out in West Texas. We would go out there, and it was these high cliffs, and they had caves. And Hines Cave was just a couple of ranches over from him. But Hines Cave is a place that the people have lived for over 10,000 years. And the fiber intake, they call it corpology. They studied people's feces from like 10 million years ago. And they found that the adult male, 10,000 years ago, ate about 150 to 225 grams of fiber a day. So this is the nutritional landscape upon which our genome and our microbiome were programmed. And the microbiome is getting very important, as you know. The microbiome is all the bacteria we have in our gut. There are more cells in our body that are bacteria than are human cells. Japanese, why can they eat seaweed and we can't? Did they evolve? No. Their microbiome has evolved so they can digest seaweed. We can't. So it's very important to keep that status quo. How much fiber do we eat today? The average American eats about 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day. The recommendations double that, 25 to 35 grams. And maybe 5% of us get enough fiber in our diet. So try to increase fiber to reduce your cardiovascular risk. It's been shown to reduce your lipid profile, improve your blood pressure, improve fibrinolysis, improves insulin sensitivity. Psyllium is the best way to do this. There are three grains that I'll show you in a minute that are very helpful for fiber. It needs to be viscous. It needs to be soluble. And one of the things with psyllium, we have our enteric circulation, our liver. When you eat a meal, your body doesn't know what you're going to eat. It's a breakfast, so your body says, "My God, this person hasn't fed me all night long. There may be some fat in it. Fat has over twice as many calories. Let's put some bile out that has cholesterol in it so we can absorb the fat, because fat and fat mixes better than fat and water." So you have a circulation of bile salts that goes 6 or 8 times a day. 95% of it's reabsorbed. You put in fiber, and that actually blocks the cholesterol absorption, and it blocks some of the cholesterol synthesis in the liver. So the 3 fibers that are really good are oatmeal, beta-glucan, oatmeal or oat bran. Could be just standard old oats. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just don't get the one that has the brown sugar in it and stuff. And psyllium. Those are the 2 best. The other one is barley, which is great. I had some barley last night. It was in a beer, but that doesn't. That doesn't count, unfortunately. So it does lower cholesterol. It does lower sugar, and it does obviously help laxation. The thing you can do is add some of this, add some fiber to the statin that you already may be on. And this was an interesting study that looked at simvastatin 10 versus Simva 10 plus psyllium versus doubling the dose of Simva up to 20. And they gave them a pretty good amount. Psyllium husk 3 times a day. And you can see that the total cholesterol, TC, came down. The white is the simvastatin, and the gray in the middle is Simva and psyllium. You can see that the LDL actually came down more by adding psyllium and keeping the statin dose the same than it did by doubling the statin dose. And so for a lot of patients that are statin intolerant, this is a great way to help them tolerate the statin better, low dose, add more fiber to their diet. So Simba 10 plus psyllium equals Simba 20. In the LDL lowering, when you double a statin dose, only lowers your LDL by another 7% anyway. And this will lower it maybe 8 or 10%. So the CV effects of fiber. Fiber intake is 1/10 of what we used to take in. Americans eat about less than half of the recommended daily dose of fiber. The high-fat, low-carb diets provide the lowest amount of fiber, unfortunately. And then oatmeal, oat bran, psyllium are the best supplements you can take. And there are multiple ways this helps. Now, we don't have any outcome studies, really, that for CV events, because it's very hard to do a prospective trial saying you eat fiber, you not. But we've done a lot of retrospective observational trials and have shown a great benefit to fiber. So what else do we do? Well, we tell people to diet and to eat a American Heart low-fat diet with less less saturated fats and more polyunsaturated fat. I mean, people have no idea. I have no idea what I'm eating. You eat something that has 6 or 8 or 10 ingredients, you don't know what's in it. So what we really need to do is we can lower our cholesterol level. And the American Heart low-fat diet has been shown to lower your LDL, but it raises your mortality. Why? Because we're eating a lot of corn oil, a lot of canola oil, which used to be called rapeseed, and they changed that name. We eat less olive oil. And canola and corn oil have 0 anti-inflammatory property. Monounsaturated fats have a lot of anti-inflammatory properties. That may be the benefit. What we need to do is tell people to eat foods. Eat an apple, eat this, eat that, not a chemical, because nobody understands the chemical part of it. So that's where the Mediterranean diet has come in, I think has been so successful. If you look at the original, the Lyon Heart Study, which was 20 years ago, they showed that in patients that had disease, the Mediterranean diet, you had less heart attacks or recurrent heart attacks and death than if you ate a more regular diet. So the Mediterranean diet reduced events post-MI. But people said, would it help if you haven't had heart disease? Does it really help? So the Predimed study came out a few years ago. I'm sure everybody's heard of it. Looked at heart attack, stroke, and death. And there are 3 important points here. One is that they stopped the study early. The DSMB, the Data Safety Monitoring Board, said we can't ethically continue to go on because the people eating Mediterranean are doing so much better. So they stopped it early. The second thing is you can see the survival curves, free of events, really diverge very early. And the Mediterranean did not lower weight, it did not lower cholesterol. Again, it was probably an anti-inflammatory effect of the olive oils and the nuts that were given. And the third thing is the control diet, you know what it was. It was the American Heart low-fat diet. In fact, this study was done in Spain, and about halfway through, they found a lot of the Spanish people were continuing to eat Mediterranean because they lived in Spain. And they had to go to them and say, listen, you cannot do this. Don't keep doing this. And after they did that, you see these curves diverged even further. There was only a 20% difference in the first 2.5 years, but a 50% difference in outcomes in the second 2.5 years. So the Mediterranean diet reduces events, and the more you're adherent to it, the better it is for you. Here it is. Basically, there's 10 do's, 4 don'ts. You'll see my Twitter account at the end. You can go on there. I'll post it on there if you want to get it. We actually have a PDF we give patients. It's a quiz. They take it. I said it takes you years to change your diet. It took years to get here. So slowly change. You can't go fast. And the other thing is people always ask about alcohol. There's a little bit of alcohol in the Mediterranean diet. 3 ounces for women, 5 ounces of wine for men. And people say, does alcohol really help you? And I'm not sure. And there's a database where they look at millions of people that buy things in stores. And if you buy it in a store like a grocery store that sells alcohol and sells food, there's actually a database like that. And they don't know that that I bought it, but they know that somebody bought it. So they said, let's look and see what people buy. And here is one, and on the left-hand side is the wine buyers, and on the right-hand side is the beer buyers. Well, what do wine buyers buy? They buy olives, low-fat cheese, fruits, vegetables, oil, low-fat milk. What do beer buyers eat? Eggs, chips, ready-cut cold cuts, pork, butter, sausage. So I don't know. It may be the company it keeps. But the benefits of the Mediterranean diet, it lowers a lot of things, not just heart attacks and strokes, diabetes, Alzheimer's, probably the anti-inflammatory effect, arthritis. The anti-inflammatory effect helps arthritis. It helps Parkinson's, reduce Parkinson's onset. It reduces erectile dysfunction in men. It's the only diet that's been shown to reduce female erectile dysfunction or sexual dysfunction. So it really is quite helpful. But it really reminds me of, you tell patients to do this and eat correctly and be active. It reminds me of this guy talking to the doc and says, "Come on, give it to me straight, doc. How long do I have to ignore your advice?" So what do? We take statins. I actually had a staff guy at Mayo the other day come to me and said, "I want to take a statin so I can eat what I want." And the caloric intake in adult statin users and non-users, you can see in this NHANES database over about a dozen years, if you don't take statins versus the statin users, they actually eat more and their BMI increases more. So we think it makes us superhuman. We can eat whatever we want. And that's just not correct. But I think the bottom line, there's two slides I'm going to show you. If you remember nothing else today, remember this slide and the next one I'm going to tell you in a few minutes. This is a study of beneficial effects of statins if you eat healthy or don't eat healthy. So this is the index of the Mediterranean diet, the Alternative Healthy Eating Index. You take a questionnaire. And they looked and said, if people are on statins, what's their chance of having a death or heart attack and heart failure, et cetera? 20,000 patients, they took a statin. And you can see quartile 1 is the unhealthiest eating pattern. Quartile 5 was the healthiest, so it's the most Mediterranean. You can see if you're in the bottom 40% of healthy eating, you got no benefit from the statin whatsoever. So if you're not eating healthy, the benefits of a statin are significantly lessened. So I had to tell my colleague that wanted to take a statin so he eat whatever he wanted. I'm sorry, you really do have to still eat healthy. So every time you eat or drink, you're either fighting disease or you're feeding it. That's what we need to think like, and that's everything we put in our mouth. And it's a learned habit. It really is. I've been to cultures, they gave me some worms the other day in some culture. I was in South America. And they said, "Oh, God, this is the best one. You should eat this one." I said, "Oh, my God, I can't eat that." The last thing is regular, vigorous physical activity. So how are we doing with this? What are we teaching our kids? This made me really mad for a couple of reasons. This is in Moscow, and there's a subway ticket machine. If you do 30 squats, it's like a Wii device. It sees what you're doing, and it gives you a free ticket. So that really made me mad because, number one, I don't like Putin and Russia being ahead of us. Number two, I was actually in Chicago the other day and got a free ticket at the subway. It was because the ticket machine was broken, and the guard was saying, "Everybody just go in." It's fine. So I think this is a very good use of technology. Very good use of technology. So why should we be physically active? The human body is programmed in such a way that most of our systems, the skeletal, the muscle, the metabolic, the cardiovascular, don't develop and function optimally unless they are used frequently. There's frequent physical activity, which means every 48 hours. If you don't use a muscle in 48 hours, it sends a signal out. It says, "I'm not being used. Don't send me energy anymore." The technological revolution, while it's been great and benefit to many, we're physically inactive. I don't know about you guys, but I have a job. People actually pay me to sit all day. It's really cool. It's the fourth leading cause of risk factor for death and non-communicable disease in the world now is sedentary activity. You go around the world, everybody's sitting. Everybody's on a phone. The jobs are becoming that way. So what happens when we become inactive? Insulin sensitivity goes down in 2 days, 48 hours. So your insulin levels go up. As your insulin levels go up, atherosclerosis is more likely to occur. Your visceral fat increases within a week. There is plasticity to human fat. And the human genome, again, was programmed with an environment of high physical activity. We didn't used to get up in the cave in the morning, turn to our spouse and say, "Honey, I'm going to jog for an hour," and then bring you a latte on the way home. There is no reason for humans to run long distances. There is no carnivore we can outrun. There is no herbivore, except maybe a sloth or a turtle, that we can run faster than. So we get up, we go out of the cave, we try to find something to eat, we find a rabbit, we chase it. Will we chase it for an hour? No, we chase it for a minute or two, or we'd get away. Or something would chase us. Wouldn't chase us for an hour, it'd chase us for a minute or two, we'd get away, or he'd catch us and it'd be all over. So it was a survival thing. So the vigorous interval activity, your body doesn't know why you're moving so fast. That's for survival. If you couldn't move fast 10,000 years ago, in certain instances, for a few minutes, you didn't live, you didn't survive, you didn't get find food. And that's very interesting because within seconds of a vigorous interval, and I'll show you what that is in a minute, you start to feel the burn. Once you feel the burn in your muscles are way ahead of you. It's already sending out signals to the heart, say, heart, pump more. As you know, the heart can pump 7-fold as much blood within seconds. So, Dr. Kahn told you Monday, okay, we're going to see 7 times as many patients in the office. They'd say, what are you smoking, Dr. Kahn? This isn't going to work. Arteries are told to open up, vasodilate. Say the heart's pumping more blood. If you don't open the artery, I don't get the blood, then I'm not surviving. And the third thing, which is really great, is that there's about 20 minutes of sugar in a cell. The cell is saying in the muscle, I am using all my energy. But fat, which you put on as an adult, you pay me back later. So every one of these intervals over a certain threshold it's an IOU. The fat owes the muscle later on. So you're back home, you're sitting in the kitchen, drinking a glass of water, talking to your spouse, and the fat's breaking down, sending energy packets to the muscles so they can do this again, because again, it may be a survival thing. You don't know when you're going to have to run again for survival. So this is the interval. You warm up, you go very hard. We tell patients not to worry about heart rates, just worry about how intense you're doing it. You should say on the upswing of this curve, this is really hard. I can't keep this up. And as you get in better shape, you have to go harder to do that. The second thing is don't go long. Too many men think a 20-minute interval is great. You can't go that hard if you go long. 120 seconds has been shown. You can even have patients with EFs of 20% with defibrillators in. It doesn't increase their VT, VF. So the intervals compared to continuous, which is just steady walking, uses more calories, vasodilates more, lowers triglycerides more, raises HDL more than the standard, and you also get in better shape. So you need 10 minutes 3 times a week. It's been shown that if you do 10 minutes 3 times a week with 3 intervals, that will put you in good a shape in 2 months as if you walked fast for 45 minutes 3 times a week. So it's a time thing. And who has 45 minutes 3 times a week? Nobody has. What do you do? Well, patients say, what type of activity should I do? And Einstein had a great quote. He said, everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. So I say, do whatever you want to do. You want to swim. You want to chase your wife around the bedroom. It doesn't matter to me. Do whatever it is that will get your heart rate, get your activity level up. And the other thing I want to show you is this slide. This is the second slide I'd like you to remember. These are survival curves according to body mass index and exercise capacity in all-cause mortality. And they divide people into 2 groups, a BMI over or under 30, and be able to go 10 METs or not. That 10 METs is a pretty good workload, I admit. But you can see that the people that go over 10 METs have the best survival. The people that go less than 10 METs, even with a normal body mass index, have the lowest survival. And the highest mortality was the deconditioned people with a BMI less than 30. So I tell patients, I don't really care about you losing weight because I know you're not. I don't tell them that. But I really want you to get in physical shape. I really want you to be active and do more activity. So fitness trumps fatness at every level of BMI. And the benefit of a normal BMI is limited to the fit individuals in terms of mortality. So now you can forget everything else I'm going to say here. The other thing is that AFib is reduced when you give them a medicine, which is actually called exercise. If you can increase your fitness by 2 METs, then you can lower your incidence of AFib by about 60%. So every MET you can increase your activity level, you lower your AFib incidence. And these are people that either are at risk for AFib or have AFib. And then exercise is not without its risks. It does reduce cancer. Every type of activity, every type of cancer, is reduced except for one. What's the one that's increased? It's the one where you go outside, melanoma. So tell your patients to always wear sunscreen. And finally, people say, well, I'm not a fit doctor. I don't do exercise, but I'm always active. I'm always moving. I say that's good. The NEAT, the non-exercise activity of thermogenesis is great. Chewing gum is good, but it's not going to get you fit, But there's physical activity and there's cardiorespiratory fitness. And they're two different things, and they're both good. But which one is more beneficial? The fitness actually lowers your mortality by about 2/3, your cardiovascular risk. Being physically active lowers it about 1/3. So we try to get people fit, not just active. But if all you can do is activity, then that's fine. And the last thing is we have these jobs that tell us to sit all day. 1 million patients, they all sat at least 4 hours a day. This was the first study that came out last year in the Lancet to show that physical activity after work can actually negate the bad effects that you get of sitting all day. So as you probably heard, sitting all day is like smoking a half a pack of cigarettes in terms of raising your risk for heart attack and stroke. So you can actually negate that by being physically active. And I ask patients to do that. Oh, doctor, I get home, I'm so tired. I can't do it. I'm just too tired. I say do 3 intervals, 10 minutes. That's it. If you're not physically fit and you're taking a statin, guess what? The statin really doesn't work very well. This was a large cohort of patients that can only go 5 mets in the orange, can go 9 mets in the green, and you can see it doesn't matter if they're on a statin or not. They got much more benefit if they were fit, but even if they were on a statin, their benefit of the statin was decreased by about 70% when they weren't fit. So those are the two things, the eating and the fitness you need to remember. So the key points, physical activity, what helps us the most? There are 4 proven beneficial categories. Aerobic activity, either moderate vigorous for 150 minutes a week, or do the aerobic more vigorous for even shorter spells. Muscle strengthening a couple of days a week just for 10 minutes is very necessary as you go through life. Avoid prolonged sitting. A recent study showed that if you got up for 100 seconds every 30 minutes and just walk to the bathroom or walk to a coworker's desk, that lowers your insulin levels, lowers your blood sugar, raises your HDL more. So you got to be active. Remember, we didn't sit in the cave all day. We used to get up and walk around. So the best activity, simple, the one you'll do. Doesn't matter what it is. Now, this was in Serbia. I was there recently, and this was a pizza machine. And it says, the Serbians I was with said, the words there say, cooked fresh daily, put the money in, and in 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes, you'll get a free pizza. This is a very poor use of technology. But remember, change is hard. Being active, eating differently is hard. Anybody from Sweden that grew up in Sweden? In 1967, they switched from driving on the left-hand side to the right-hand side. And they announced this for months in advance. It was going to happen at a certain time, 5 p.m. I think on this day. They had signs up, reminders, television, etc. This was the result. So change is hard. You have to change slowly. And I tell patients that. And finally, how many ways to die are there? There are 4 ways to die. One is sudden death. Cardiology, we have the franchise on that pretty good. There's the terminal illness. You get a pancreatic cancer and you're dead in 3 months. There's organ failure and frailty. Those are the 2 where you have a miserable life for a couple of decades. And if you can do these things, the activity, the eating more properly, being optimistic, not smoking, trying to get your weight normally, you will guarantee you're in the top 2, the sudden death or the rapid death, rather than this slow, painful, miserable existence type of death. And one final thought. People say, doctor, I'm 80 years old, or I'm 60 years old. I can't, what should I do? It doesn't matter to me now. I said there is no effort to change your lifestyle for the better that is too little, and there is no effort that is too late. So tell patients whatever they can do, just try to do it. So thanks for your attention. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Kopecky. As I mentioned to you at the beginning of the day, we have index cards. At the end of the next lecture, we'll be doing a Q&A discussion with both Dr. Kopecky and our next speaker, Dr. Amsterdam. So if you have any questions, write them down, and we can go over them at that Q&A session. So next up, we have Dr. Amsterdam. He began his medical career at the University of Rochester, did an internship